Why Battle City is the peak of Yu-Gi-Oh anime by Enigma. So, as all of you will know, love Yu-Gi-Oh GX. I also love original Duel Monsters. I haven't really given 5Ds its fair shake just because it was airing at weird times. However, I do have fond memories of Battle City. That was when the rules in the anime at the very least kind of started to come together. Duelist Kingdom, we had Mirror Force doing interesting things. We attacked to the moon. We had Karibo infinitely spawning. We had Living Arrow fusing Skull Mammoth with Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. We had so many weird interactions that are possible in an RPG setting, but not necessarily a TCG setting. Whereas Battle City, we start to see modern Yu-Gi-Oh as it's coming to be, come into being and start shaping itself. So I think a lot of us will say that Battle City holds a lot of cool memories and a lot of memories of a lot of interesting characters. But see why. I love seeing the why, seeing the reasoning behind things like this.
Yu-Gi-Oh has undergone numerous iterations over the course of its more than 20 years of anime and manga, with each one exploring new subjects and ideas through the lens of a pure-hearted adolescent. From fending off bullies in high school to the very real threat of artificial intelligence wiping out humanity, Yu-Gi-Oh has taught me that just about anything can be solved with card games. And despite its
It's so true. I've been watching Yu-Gi-Oh GX recently, and I've been going back through the series because I go through every now and again. And it's so funny when you remember that politics, finance, and Yu-Gi-Oh, dueling are all on the same level in society. This is specifically from the Princeton family, right? Chaz Princeton and his two brothers, who are the heads of politics and finance. So he needs to get dueling, so thus they can control the world. Oh, it's so campy! I love it. I actually watched what was it, the Little Belowski last night, that episode, and he's talking about like red jackets, yellow jackets, blue jackets. Man, that's just social division set up by the man to instill social divisionism. And I'm like, oh my god. Oh my god, kids show, by the way. We're actually talking about ethical consumerism and the man, quote unquote, and dystopia in this episode. And it's just like, oh, it's so funny. It is just, oh god. The dub was built different is all I can say.
ever-changing approach, Yu-Gi-Oh retains its spot as the #1 most profitable Jump franchise to this day, aside from Dragon Ball and One Piece. However, most people in the community will have you believe that Yu-Gi-Oh peaked a long time ago and hasn't come close in the near 2 decades since.
I would argue, and there's a lot of people that are currently arguing, that Yu-Gi-Oh, as it stands currently, has a high barrier to entry for a lot of new players. Yeah, I mean, sure, a lot more people would probably play if they didn't have to read 2-3 paragraphs per card, right? And even in my opinion, the worst, both professional and personal, the worst thing that you can do to a new Yu-Gi-Oh player is hand them the core rulebook out of a structure deck or something and say, look, this is how you play the game. Because that's absolutely not. That will not tell you the interaction between Book of Moon and Guardian Chimera, right? The fusion monster, right? Because there is a specific interaction there, and I believe it does still get its effect even though it is flip face down. It doesn't tell you interactions like that. Or back in Duelist Alliance era, how we had Tellarknight Deneb, and how in Europe it was ruled that if you were to Call of the Haunted a Deneb, it would get the search off. But in America, it was ruled where if you say had the Call of the Haunted MST'd in the situation, right? Call of the Haunted was MST'd, even though Deneb did technically hit the field, it would not get the effect, which has since been homogenized as not as all areas. It will not get the effect because it didn't properly hit the field. There's so many things to consider. And even then, like Waboku, how Waboku is worded in such a way that the attacks will still go through, but no damage actually happens or destruction of monsters. There's so much there. And so I'd argue it does have a high barrier for entry, which is why, circling back, a lot of people look back on early Yu-Gi-Oh! Pretty fondly, in my opinion.
I agree. Don't get me wrong, there have been some excellent story arcs throughout the years, and I'm not saying that any of them are necessarily bad. The pinnacle was simply so high that it will most likely never be reached again.
No.
That's why today we're going to discuss how Battle City became the pinnacle of Yu-Gi-Oh anime.
That was, wow, I haven't seen that in a hot minute. That's Yu-Gi-Oh! The Falsebound Kingdom. I have my copy right over there. I've been debating on streaming it, actually. God, that was a weird game, but it was super cool. Think Monster Rancher, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Monsters. It's so cool, actually. Hard sometimes.
Although
cool.
Duelist Kingdom is the arc that catapulted Yu-Gi-Oh! Into mainstream popularity and made the card game an international sensation, it's the Battle City arc that demanded Yu-Gi-Oh! Be taken seriously. not just as an anime, but as a card game
I appreciate the Sonic Adventure 2 battle music.
too. Now, Yu-Gi-Oh! Wasn't a complete disaster prior to Battle City. It had all of the same themes throughout its entire run, and the card game was already at the center of the story.
Right.
It's the execution of these ideas that fell flat. You see, prior to Battle City, the version of the card game that existed within the anime was little more than a confusing mess. In fact,
and this is kind of my take on this, is if you wanted to say run a loose D&D session, and I say loose because you can apply certain situations, mechanics, dice rolls, etc., in regards to a Yu-Gi-Oh! Quote-unquote campaign, but you show up with a 4-pocket binder, right? You know the binders that are a 2x2 instead of a 3x3, or you can up with a 3x3, right? And you just bring all the cards that you want to the table. So you bring your Pot of Greed, you bring your Swords of Revealing Light, you bring your Slight for the Sky Dragon, Blue Eyes, whatever, what have you, right? And you come to this RPG with those in mind, and then, you know, when you're done with it, you know, you just turn the card over because you've used it for that encounter or that session, right? And I think that there's cool interactions that could happen with that. And that would be more of a Duelist Kingdom thing. I would argue Duelist Kingdom is more set up like an RPG than a hardcore card game or a hardcore game in general.
In fact, the protagonist of the series is still regarded as a cheater due to the way he played during Duelist Kingdom, activating Monster Replace during his opponent's turn, fusing Mammoth Graveyard with a spell card, and attacking the moon to destroy the sea.
This is #1 bullshit.
These are all things that Yugi actually does. I suppose it doesn't matter to
No, Quest, you cannot eat the gelatinous cube. I love that this is a running meme at this point, though, that chat just keeps asking to the gelatinous cube. The answer is no, you don't get to eat the gelatinous cube.
One who's never played the game before, and that's who most of the audience was when it first aired, but this created a divide among the players of the real game. Those who read the rulebook,
yes,
and those who did not. I should note that this problem didn't exist in Japan because Yu-Gi-Oh! Was marketed as for ages 12 and up before it came to the West. But outside of Japan, Yu-Gi-Oh! Was marketed towards a much younger age. That's why the anime was so heavily censored by 4Kids. They wanted to make Yu-Gi-Oh! Well,
Shadow Realm. Oh my god, I have to vent about this for a second. So I found another 4Kids-ism, and I'm having to like squeeze my nose right now. Like you know when you like have a headache, you have to just squeeze the bridge between your nose. I have to just explain how censored some of this can be. Obviously, we know the Shadow Realm. Obviously, we know the Saw Blades thing in Duelist King, or not Duelist King, Battle City. We know the finger guns, quote unquote, in Duelist Kingdom. So I was watching YuGiOh GX, and this was the episode with the golden egg, which, you know, the Tarzan dude, Damien, right? And no joke, like I'm watching this at like 4 a.m. So I'm just kind of relaxing, right? And we have Dorothy, the cafeteria lady, walk in with a plate of onigiri, and it's like, I brought tarts or something along that like some sort of like hot food, right? Like some sort of just like, here's your sweet tarts, not like a donut, but a tart, right? And I'm like, excuse you, what do you mean that's a tart? And they're all just like, yeah, no tarts. And I'm like, it literally shows a rice ball. What are you talking about? And so here's the thing. This is the same anime where, like, in the second episode, we have Professor Banner literally saying, he's talking about like Dual Alchemy, and he's like, I cover some of the lesser known things about Duel Monsters, some things that some might consider unnatural. And I'm like, excuse you? What you just said? We're gonna rewind that 5 seconds. I know I didn't hear you right. And yeah, it's a straight up Revenge of the Sith reference. It's so campy and I love it. So yeah, I get to the scene and, you know, Jaden takes a bite out of it. And he's like, oh, it's strawberry. And I'm like, oh my god, And see, here's the beauty of it is I literally can't tell if they did it to just troll or if they literally did it because of a legitimate censor. And I'm just like, this series just defies logic.
4Kids. The point I'm trying to make here is that a 6-year-old is way less likely to read a rulebook than a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
Especially when they could just point to a TV and say, look, he did it, so I can too.
Yeah.
So not only did the limited rules in Duelist Kingdom make it impossible to take the anime seriously,
Joey Wheeler
it also
face.
made it harder for people to play with each other.
We step up and I challenge this guy to a duel. He accepts, and we sit down to play. He opens his hand, you know, he gets his cards, and he's like, well, boy, Goblin Attack Force, go ahead. Well, I have this card, the Blue Eyes White Dragon.
Sure. You can't just drop it.
You can't just summon a Blue Eyes White Dragon.
Levels 5 and 6 require 1 tribute to normal summon. Level 7 plus require 2 tributes unless stated by otherwise. The Egyptian gods require 3 tributes because it is required in their effect text that they do require 3 tributes. 7 plus 2 tributes.
On your first turn. And I looked at him and was like, don't get mad because you're about to lose. He literally took his deck and put it in his bag, and he took a rule book out of his bag and he threw it at your boy. He said, get good. What a coward. Running away from my Blue Eyes White Dragons?
What?
That obviously didn't stop the game from becoming insanely popular, but it wouldn't have lasted all these years if Konami didn't get it under control, and Battle City played a large role in doing.
I had a buddy I used to have. I haven't talked with him for a hot minute. And he would carry, don't do this. I cannot condone doing this. He would walk around with rule books and he would say sit down to have a game or sit down to duel, right? And if he won, he would, and you know, his opponent lost, he would hand them a rule book as a departure gesture. And I'm like, first of all, I can laugh at that. Second, that is so rude. I can't imagine, right? If you're playing Magic the Gathering, right? Say I bust out Modern Tron, right? And you were playing Modern or whatever, right? Because I have Modern Tron. And I just, you know, you're running Death Shadow, maybe you make a misplay or something like that. And, you know, I end up just, you know, Karn Liberated ends up just wiping the floor. Or have my Ulamog that just smashes into you repeatedly, right? And for whatever reason, I win, and I hand you a Magic the Gathering standard rulebook, right? How rude that would be. Someone might actually table flip that. God.
Doing that. And not only did Battle City make sense of the rules, it did so without detracting from the entertainment value.
The entertainment was perfect.
Now that we understand the significance of formalizing the rules, we can turn our attention to the real highlight of Battle City, the narrative. The most underappreciated aspect of Yu-Gi-Oh! Has always been its depiction of friendship. Have you ever wondered why Exodia is comprised of 5 different cards? The design is rooted in mythology, but the reason for exactly 5 different pieces is to represent each member of Yugi's friend group. This is also why each
I actually didn't notice that parallel, but that actually makes a lot of sense.
piece is powerless unless all 5 are used at the same time. It's a metaphor for friendship. Back in Season 0, when Exodia was first introduced, these 5 characters, Yugi, Joey, Tristan, Anzu, and Yami, were meant to be viewed as equals. Of course, Yugi was still the main character, and the plot focused on him for a majority of Season 0's duration.
Season 0 is a trip. I actually need to go back and like watch it. It's a trip.
But when Yugi's friends were used against him and he had to save them by himself, they realized that they were holding him back. A group is only as powerful as its weakest member, after all. So they went on their own journeys and became stronger on an individual level. This made them feel more like cast members and less like dead weight to be carried by the protagonist, as is often the case with friend groups in shonen anime, especially those of the other Yu-Gi-Oh series. Now, what has any of this got to do with Battle City? Most of that friendship stuff was thrown out in Duelist Kingdom. Kaiba remains a bitter rival, obsessing over his defeat from the first episode. Joey returns to Yugi's shadow, and with the exception of a few brief moments, the rest of Yugi's friends are reduced to cheerleading, completely.
Yeah, I could see where that's a valid critique, especially if Season 0 focuses so hard on that friendship and growth aspect, and to see Duelist Kingdom where it's effectively watered, I could see that.
Undoing the previous arc. At first glance, Battle City appears to be no different. It's a tournament arc following another tournament arc. Even though the rules have been refined, the game remains the same, and both emphasize Yugi's relationship with Kaiba. In many ways, it resembles a second attempt at the same story arc. However, when you consider how these concepts are applied, Battle City is very much a return to that Season 0 form, while at the same time, it stands out in virtually every way. And we only need to consider one character to illustrate this point. Ever since Yu-Gi-Oh! Became a story
the disc scratch, I love the soundtrack he's backing it with.
Focused on one specific game rather than games in general, Joey has been used to explain the rules. He's the only character to start with 0 game knowledge, and as the show goes on, it's always Joey.
Sonic Adventure 2 battle is just built different. You have to understand. Like, I've streamed this game a couple times. The soundtrack is chef's kiss. It's perfection.
Makes mistakes and needs to be corrected by Yugi. Clearly, he was intended to be a stand-in for the audience. And I know insert characters get a bad rap, which is totally justified, but what if I told you that Joey Wheeler is my favorite character in Yu-Gi-Oh! Because of how accurately he represents the audience?
Yeah, I could see
That's
that.
right. The problem with insert characters is that they're typically very plain in order to feel relatable to as many people as possible. However, Joey Wheeler, especially in the Battle City arc, is only relatable to those who share his ambition to become a true duelist. What does it mean to be a true duelist? Joey never explains exactly what he means by this, but he does refer to Yugi as a true duelist when discussing his goal. But why him? What sets Yugi apart from the rest of the duelists? His win and loss record is about the same as Kaiba's, so that can't be it. Yugi does have a bit of plot armor due to his friendship, but Joey's a member of that same friend group, so why doesn't that plot armor extend to him? I think it boils down to motivation. How often is it that Yugi plays for the sake of winning? Aside from Duelist Kingdom when he must win in order to rescue his grandpa,
Right.
Yugi has always played for the love of gaming. And it's this passion that has earned Yugi respect and admiration. How can you be...
I could see that. So it's finding your own reasoning and finding your quote unquote own will to fight, so to speak, right? To find that inspiration, to find that motivation, to find that reason.
somebody who enjoys the process more than the outcome? This is the mentality that made Yugi invincible, and it wasn't until Battle City that Joey realized it. Just before the tournament starts, Joey loses his most valuable card, the Red Eyes Black Dragon, and Yugi is tasked with getting it back for him. For Joey, the opponent seemed unbeatable, as he won using Exodia, which is the most powerful card in the game. But
Man actually ran like he ran playsets of each of those. Oh god, that man was built different.
Yugi faces that same foe, he not only defeats the guy, but exposes him as a cheater in the process. At this point, it would be easy for Joey to shrug it off as an unwinnable match, as he stood no chance against a cheater in the first place. But Yugi's win is so impressive that instead, Joey has an epiphany. He realizes that as long as he lives in Yugi's shadow, he will never become a true duelist. Thanks to Battle City's anti-rule, one that requires the loser of a duel to give their best card to the winner, Yugi is able to retrieve the Red Eyes. But when he tries to give it to Joey, Joey rejects the offer, says he'll earn it back in the spirit of a true duelist, and goes a separate way. While Joey has Yugi to fall back on, it's easy for him to make mistakes, so he essentially removed a safety net by distancing himself from Yugi. But now that he's alone, the pressure is on. As the arc progresses, Joey strengthens his knowledge of the game, gains confidence in his own abilities through duels, and with each win, he acquires a new card to strengthen his deck.
And we get to see a lot of cool characters, like Mako Tsunami returned. We got to see Esperoba come into the fold. We got to see Rex Raptor come back. Got to see Weevil Underwood. Like we got to see a couple reprises and even meet a couple new characters. Bakura doing things.
But it isn't until the Mako Tsunami duel that he cracks the code and finally realizes what it means to be a true duelist. Remember, Mako Tsunami was one of Yugi's opponents back in Duelist Kingdom, and when they first met, Joey was barely more than a background character. He was entered in the tournament just like Yugi and Mako, but Yugi coached him through almost all of his duels. Now in Battle City, Joey is good enough to contend with the likes of Weevil Underwood all on his own.
Yeah.
Even though he still makes mistakes at times, Joey is so much better than he used to be, and he's having so much more fun playing the game that it's clear he's developed a passion for it. So much so that Mako is happy to give up his signature card so he can try to earn it back in a future duel.
It is cool because I remember like Weevil Underwood would have been, from my understanding, Yugi's first opponent in Duelist Kingdom. So it is a little bit of a retread in that aspect where you have Joey defeating Weevil Underwood. You know, he's able to hold his own, where in Duelist Kingdom he really couldn't. And getting to see that growth of a character is part of a good narrative.
Now Joey is to Mako what Yugi is to Joey. There's also a duel between Joey and Yugi while Joey is being possessed by Merrick that ends so beautifully it makes Kaiba realize that Yugi's advice was right the whole time. He's stubborn so he doesn't give in right away, but this moment went a very long way towards opening up Kaiba to the idea of cooperating with other people. Now there are two reasons why Joey is still widely considered to be a joke of a character. The first is that 4Kids removed the True Duelist subplot altogether and gave Joey a new goal of wanting to help Yugi. Lame, I know, but...
I actually didn't know about this entire... I mean, to be fair, when you create literary hell to replace the concept of death, I mean, this is the first narrative overhaul they've done.
I'll save the 4Kids rant for another time. The other reason is the way Joey's character arc ends. It's not pretty. Joey versus Merrick. This part is quite frustrating because it undercuts everything that Joey went through leading up to this duel, but let's set the stage. Joey has made it to the finals, and if he beats Merrick, he gets to face the winner of Yugi versus Kaiba in the grand finals. Obviously, Joey wants to face Yugi so he can try to earn back his red eyes. And much to everyone's surprise, Joey beats Merrick. Except he doesn't, because he dies during his game-winning turn. I know that Yugi is the main character, and Merrick is the main villain. So naturally you would think, okay, obviously Yugi has to be the one to beat him. But Joey winning here would have made perfect sense thematically. In fact, I think Takahashi's original plan was to have Joey win this duel, and then he would go on to face Yugi in the end, and even beat Yugi. Especially since Yugi already defeated Merrick twice earlier in the arc.
Yeah.
I suspect that a Jump editor convinced Takahashi-sensei that making Joey the one to beat Merrick was a bad idea. Joey wasn't popular enough to save the day, so he was advised against it.
I would argue, yeah, it might have lessened the narrative impact of Merrick specifically, and saving it for a Yugi v Merrick, you know, having the... We knew him as the Pharaoh at this point, right? We didn't know it was a Tem until season 5, until the ending, but I mean, we knew him as the Pharaoh, right? The Pharaoh versus the... Merrick was one of the keepers, right? The grave keepers, if I remember correctly. Having that whole subplot, I would argue that that narratively held more significance, at least in the dub.
If you don't know what I'm talking about, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is based on a weekly manga that was published in Shonen Jump. Jump editors have a lot of influence because Jump magazines are insanely competitive. Taking the advice of an editor can save a series from being cut altogether. A popular example of this is the Chunin exams in Naruto. Orochimaru interrupted them and attacked the third Hokage because a Jump editor told Kishimoto-sensei that the exams were taking too long. And I'm not just saying this because
That's actually not the first time that editors have kind of done that with Kishimoto, from my understanding. From my understanding, the reason why we didn't really have any fleshed out Mist Swords, like we got the Mist Swordsman eventually, right? We got Genie and Akabino, trying to remember the rest of their names, but the War Arc in Shippuden, right? We got more Seven Swordsman stuff, but we really didn't, because we had I think it was Raiga Kurosuke or something like that in the original Naruto filler, like original Naruto filler part of that. There was they introduced like the Thunder God's Blade or something like that, and from my understanding, at least through the grapevine, this would require substantiation. Because he was pushed to do that, he really was kind of soured because he had a plan for the seven swords down the line, the Seven Swordsmen, and they didn't. He's just like, I don't want to do it at this point now, because ever since the Zabuza arc, right? There's 7 Swordsmen of the Mist. That's kind of cool, and a lot of people, rightfully so, wanted in. I myself have a Hidden Mist headband somewhere. I can't remember where it is, but Hidden Mist, love that village.
Think it would have been better for the story? The plan to make Joey the king of games at the end of Battle City is heavily implied. Yugi and Joey also have an off-screen duel at the end of the arc anyway, and in the Dark Side of Dimensions movie, Joey can be seen holding the Red Eyes Black Dragon card, implying that Joey was victorious in their off-screen duel.
So that one is a little stranger because, as far as I'm aware, Dark Side of Dimensions, which I thought was fully canon, and is only manga canon, and is not canon to the anime. But as always in the comments, if you know more on the subject than I do, please, I'm all ears.
Coincidence? I think not. Couple that with the fact that the final arc was about the Millennium items and Yami's past, Joey becoming the king of games would have been the perfect send-off for the card game portion of the series. By the time Battle City ended, the real Yu-Gi-Oh card game had taken on a life of its own, and no longer needed the anime or the manga to survive. Joey becoming the new figure for Duel Monsters represents the audience taking on the legacy of the game. And now that the game is no longer dependent on its source material, this holds true nearly 20 years later. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.
This is a really cool video. Doc comments, he's right about Joey's goals, but he's wrong about Joey's position in the narrative. And it could entirely be so. At the very least, even if this is a subjective, opinionative piece, right? Even if it is just that. It was a very cool piece to see. I thought this was edited fairly well. I thought some of the footage was stretched a little too much. I could see the pixelation on that. But to be fair, I mean, when you have a 16:9 ratio and you're having to deal with VHS ratio where it's a square box, right? I mean, there's only so much you can do. There's only so much wiggle room you have to make it aesthetically pleasing. And at the very least, the material and the shots that were used in tandem with what was being discussed was excellent, honestly. Enigma put out great work here, and I think he nailed it on the head with a lot of things. And I think that he was able to encapsulate Battle City, kind of tying back into Season 0, but as well as redoing Season 1 in certain aspects. I think that there's a lot that this video offered, and I'm a little surprised this video doesn't have a lot more views, which that's where I come in. If you did like this video, because I do, associate in different circles. If you did like this video, I absolutely recommend that you go and check this video out, as well as any other videos that Enigma might have put out. It looks like he's put out a few in regards to Yu-Gi-Oh, and I'm very curious what else he's got up his sleeve, or curious in his backlog as well. But what are your thoughts? Do you think that the analysis of Jonichi, I believe is the Japanese name, right, was on point? Do you think that it was, goals were right, narratively it was wrong? What's your favorite memory from Battle City? What's your favorite Yu-Gi-Oh card? I can tell you mine's Super Polymerization, but alas, let me know in the comments section. As always, please be respectful, be civil, all that fun stuff, and I will see you in the next one.